WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and it's that time of the year where we start to assess baseball and we start to assess the notion that the Baltimore Orioles are not going to contend this year. Chris Pike has seen many of these years, going back to 1988, where this team is sort of on that horrific pace, Chris. And you've worked in many organizations, the Falcons, the Saints. You worked in minor league baseball. Nothing worse than a 20-50 start in Major League Baseball when the manager's lame duck, the GM's lame duck. We just saw what a lame duck coach did after winning a championship down in D.C. with Barry Trotz. And then you have Machado and Jones, all of this dangling, and really quite a mess here, and quite a mess for whomever will inherit this. As you know, I am inking a Dear Orioles series, a day-by-day letter to individuals each and every day over the next month as the All-Star Game is held in D.C. And, it's a turning point all the way around, and we're going to see this thing unfold. And Chris, I don't have a lot of confidence. I don't.
Well, Listen, I went through a season in New Orleans that wasn't a heck of a lot of fun, and there was a lot of outside situations that impacted upon it. And if folks remember the 2006 season, for the Saints was post Katrina. It was, we were 3-13 that year. We'd won halfway through the season. The one thing that I will say is that the axiom of every day is a new game and a new battle in baseball is very true. The coaches never stopped coaching, even though they knew what the end result was probably going to be. The players, for the most part, continued to play hard, although it just wasn't working. Whatever was being taught wasn't being received, or the players maybe weren't in the best of moods on game day. Whatever that is, and you could sort of sense the finality of a lot of things, especially when we were getting into the final 4 games of the season. But that doesn't mean that you look forward or you look behind. You worry about the game that's ahead of you that day, and especially in baseball. And I think a lot of what Buck Showalter says is true. We're just worried about today. The fans may get tied up into the overall record or a losing streak or even a winning streak for that matter. You're worried about the 25 guys you're sending out there on that day. Who's available for you in the bullpen? Who's available for you off the bench? How do you find a way to win the game that day? And there's 162 battles that make up the long war that makes up an entire baseball season. And, and some years like they've had where they've gone to the playoffs and won a division, everything's gone their way. This year, it's sort of been the reverse of a couple of those years where everything that can go wrong could go wrong. And that basically is what's happened here in 2018 for the Orioles.
All right, so you've been on the inside of some of these takeovers. Chris Pike is our guest. He, of course, is Blog and Tackle and one of my oldest media friends from the News American in 1984. And you've been a part of some of these hostile takeovers and family issues and family values and pushing things along and moving things over and rich kids. And you've seen all this front row seat in the National Football League. You've seen this as an Oriole fan, and I still identify you, I'm sure, as an Oriole fan. You'd love nothing more than to see a parade down Pratt Street with Cal Ripken and Brooks Robinson on a float leading the way and all that stuff. But that's not where we are, and where we are is trying to figure out who's competent, who's in charge, who's making the decisions. And this is, this is chess. This isn't checkers. You're competing with the Red Sox and the Yankees, analytics, smaller market, the TV money's drying up. You're left with this Chris Davis deal. You're left with a pretty empty cupboard here all the way around. And they're going to put Brady Anderson in charge, I guess, from the looks of things, right?
Well, I think that's the biggest question, and I've said this on Twitter on Blog and Tackle several times. It starts with the sons of Peter Angelos and who's going to be in charge and who makes that decision on who is the general manager, and then that person makes the decision on the roster makeup, what they do in international scouting and signings, and eventually who's your manager. And I've said this from the get-go. I still think that Buck Showalter could be the manager of the Orioles in 2019 if the Orioles make the decision that they're going to be a much younger club in 19, that they're going to have a sell-off of stars and key pieces and try to rebuild and basically do what the Houston Astros did in order to win their world championship. So but if the roster construction is going to be the same as it is now in 18, I don't see how Showalter's back in 18. Then the question's going to be, does he move up to the front office and in what role? And that's probably going to depend on who's in Dan Duquette's seat. I think that's the only thing most everybody can agree upon is that Duquette's not going to be the general manager in 19. The field manager is still up for grabs, I think, just based on how they decide, because I think Showalter would do very well with a much younger team that he could shepherd along and teach them the right ways of doing things, much like his early Orioles teams. When it gets to being very veteran clubs, maybe the message isn't resonating as much in the locker room and the clubhouse and on the field. But I still think he has a purpose for the Orioles organization. But I agree with most people. I don't see where Duquette survives this season and really shouldn't at this point.
And then there's the value of what they're going to get back from Machado or Adam Jones or Britton if he's okay, or Brock or any of these guys. I think there's an expectation amongst the fan base that is the sell-off, right? Like, they'll sell these guys and they'll get back parts and they'll plug them in and they'll get a couple of big league ball players out of this. Chris, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm starting to talk to people around Major League Baseball that don't believe they're going to get much from Machado, if anything at all, because no one is going to wow them for renting Manny Machado for 8 weeks. That it's not all that great a prize, and that position players have not brought that sort of a thing at the trading deadline. That's been more about relief pitchers or starting pitchers. And, I'm trying to level my expectations here over the next 5 weeks as I write these letters individually to all of these cast of characters in this show.
Well, I mean, listen, I think everyone can agree is that they should have made this move, if not during the winter meetings last year, then during last season when they could have gotten a lot more for Machado than they probably will now. But there are teams that could still rent him and get some sort of return. That doesn't mean you don't make a move and get something for him at this point. You're certainly not going to let him. I think it would be harder to swallow as an Oriole fan if they let Machado just walk at the end of 18 and they haven't traded him. I think that would be incompetence on a grand scale, because you got to get something for him. Whatever that something is, it may not be what you could have gotten 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, Peter Angelos is firmly in charge of the franchise. Now it's the Suns, and that's where the difference is. How are they conducting business? What do they choose to do in conducting business? And who's going to run the club in that stead? 2 years ago, the old man didn't want to make that move. Now the Suns are stuck with that decision, and they and whoever the general manager is, or Duquette more than likely, are going to have to make that decision here sometime in the next 5 weeks. I'm sure a team that I see a lot of here, and I'll see the Orioles this coming week in Atlanta. The Braves would love to have Machado for the stretch run because they've got some issues, but it's at third base, which is not where Machado wants to play. But the Braves have a need at third base. They're solid at shortstop with Dansby Swanson. There are other clubs in the same boat. So, what can you get for him? You've got to get something, because if you get nothing, then it's not a good way to start and puts a new general manager behind the eight ball.
Boy, the Chris Davis thing has taken an ugly turn, right? I mean, he's no longer a Major League Baseball player. They owe him $130 million. People are comparing him to Pujols. Pujols drove in 100 runs last year. You know what I mean? Like, he's still not, the guy that they bought it. He was going to hit 328 and, drive in 142 runs, but is still a serviceable Major League Baseball player and might still be for another 2 or 3 years. I don't know. They still owe him 3 years after this. Pujols I'm talking about. In the case of Chris Davis, this is... of all the things that hamstring an organization, this kind of a contract for a cheapskate organization to begin with most of the time, now beginning $30 million underwater every year for the next 4 years with a guy that they can't get onto the field. It's one collapse after another. Really, it's been an amazing little run here since Britton was left in the bullpen in Toronto, right?
Yeah, and the Davis thing is just... It's frustrating for everybody involved, and I'll let those who coach baseball, who watch this every single night, decide exactly, how you try to fix whatever it is his mental block or physical block from doing the things that he wants to do. But it's very hard as a fan to watch, and again, here in Atlanta, I see Nick Markakis having an all-star season, playing well, in the field, which he's always been a solid right fielder. He's been really good at the plate all season long. He is in a walk year of a contract and is probably going to get pretty good money coming out of that. And they could have kept Markakis except for medicals. And again, that goes back to Peter Angelos. They could have very well been able to keep Nick Markakis as another piece of this puzzle.
Well, that's a big thing I'm writing about, Chris, is that all this craziness that happened before, who's going to put their foot down and say this isn't going to happen around here anymore and we're going to do things differently? That is a message that for any of us who've watched all this wackiness, I'm wondering who would take this job. I mean, other than Brady Anderson, who's going to leave their assistant general manager job in Seattle or Detroit or Arizona or Houston to come here and work for these kids and their mother and Brady Anderson? And who's going to come and manage this thing where they don't do sabermetrics? They have no scouts. They refuse to sign Latin American players. I mean, international players. It's kind of crazy, and I don't know how they're going to change that perception that they're much different than the old man. They're effed up. They're just different effed up, not the same kind of effed up, you know?
Well, I think you can always find people who would be willing to take an opportunity and go in with their eyes wide open and know, hey, this is how we're going to conduct business, okay? Hey, we're making a commitment that we're going to get into the international market. Yes, we have issues with Davis's contract, and that's going to hamstring us a little bit. How do we get creative here? How much of the Houston Astros model can they steal? Okay? And that's going to require a buy-in from ownership. It's going to require a buy-in.
It's going to require somebody that can identify talent. It's going to identify.
Right.
It's going to be scouts who can identify players. It's going to be baseball people who can identify baseball players, not Brady Anderson who can identify what an attractive girl looks like, and how to fix a hitch in a swing, and play chess with the players down in the clubhouse. I mean, it's a crazy thing to think that you're going to get competent results from people who are not inherently, let's not say competent, how about expert? You know what I mean? You're competing with the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees here. You better get some smart people into this organization to start making smart decisions, because that really is at the heart of this. That's why this thing sucks. They haven't had smart people making smart decisions.
Well, I mean, I look at the fact that they made a couple playoff runs, that they did have, at one point, pretty smart people in charge.
Andy McPhail.
Walter, as a field manager, did a lot of that. And Andy McPhail, yes. They did have smart people who laid the groundwork for this team to be competitive in the East and be competitive in the playoffs, something we haven't seen in a very long time, okay? Is there someone like that? Is the rumors that they have talked to Ned Colletti or someone of that who have had some experience at the major league level and is looking for another opportunity to get back and maybe has some ideas on how to get this done and getting it across to ownership? And again, it depends on who you get. Maybe that person walks in and says, I don't want X, Y, and Z here. Okay. Now again, they may say, nope, you're stuck with, whoever these people are in the organization that they're going to have to deal with, and without naming names. And that person may decide that's not the job for them, but someone else may say, you know what, I'm going to take a crack at it, and I'm going to see if I can't be the guy to do it. Okay. And that's where they are. And there's a lot of competent baseball people out there, I think, who would want a shot at this, but you've got to have the support of ownership. You have to have the money. You have to have the people, and you have to have the commitments to do some things in a baseball business sense that helps you get over the hump. And again, they've got to be honest with the public too. They've got to sit down and tell the fans, listen, there's going to be a couple of very hard years coming. All right. This isn't going to be, it's kind of like the Braves were a few years ago. Okay. Actually, the Braves of last season were not very good. This was a team that had R.A. Dickey and Bartolo Colon in their rotation for half a season. And they had a really good first half, and then the bottom sort of dropped out, but they have a lot of good young talent that they had come up through the minor leagues. They had guys ready to go, and they're about a year ahead of schedule, and they gave the opportunity to Brian Snitker, who was a career guy in the Braves franchise in the minors, an opportunity to manage this club after they got rid of Freddie Gonzalez. And they are now in a position where they're leading the National League East and against a pretty good Washington team that's trailing them at the moment. So it can be done, but you got to be able to sell to the public and say, listen, there's going to be a few years in here where this isn't going to be very good. Stick with us, okay? We're trying to do something here, and it's going to take a lot to fix it. You can't sell a team saying, hey, our goal is to make the playoffs in 2019 when everybody in the world knows that's not the case. And if they do surprise and I wouldn't say contend, but I mean, if you get a young team and they're battling and they get you to 500 or maybe a little bit above, who knows? Okay, but at least you're not trying to oversell something that's not there. And I think the fans would buy in if they knew that there was a plan in place, but there has to be a plan.
Well, there has to be. They have to hire competent people, right? So the Ned Coletti thing leaks this week. And, I mean, I don't think they can serve Brady Anderson to me as the executive general manager of all baseball operations and get me to buy in that Brady Anderson has the magic elixir to fix the Orioles. I don't buy that. I've known Brady Anderson for 30 years. I'm not buying that. I'm just not.
Well, and I don't know if I would buy it either as a fan. I mean, but I think there are competent baseball people out there available. But again, we don't know what the Suns are thinking.
I think it's very difficult for this organization to attract those people. You know that, right? I mean, you worked in football. The best people want better organizations than the Browns. The best people turn down jobs. You know what I mean? Like, they pick the best job. This is the worst job, right? Literally, right?
Well, but I'll give you two examples from my football experience, okay? After the 1999 season, okay, the Saints cleaned house. I mean, they cleaned house all the way through GM on down, and they hired a couple of, I wouldn't say unknowns, not the football people, but Randy Mueller, who had been in Seattle, had worked his way up the ladder in Seattle, got an opportunity to be a general manager for the first time. Jim Haslett, who had had some shots, some head coaching jobs, wound up taking the New Orleans job. Okay, and no one thought we were going to do much. And that was my first season with the Saints in 2000, and we wind up winning 10 games and going to the playoffs and winning a game in those playoffs. Now, they made decisions coming off of that hurt them going forward, and Randy lasted one more year till he was mysteriously fired by Mr. Benson, and they now have Mickey Loomis as GM. And then after that Katrina season, when they were saying, well, who would want a job where you're going back to New Orleans, where they're trying to rebuild the city, you're trying to get free agents to come, what kind of coach are we going to get? And they got Sean Payton, who a lot of people were like looking at going, who? And this, well, they knew he'd worked for Parcells and had, he was a young guy looking for an opportunity. And he comes to New Orleans and gets into the NFC title game the first year. He's there after they were successfully able to get Drew Brees to come there. So, yes, turnarounds can happen. Baseball takes a lot longer than football does, but don't tell me that there aren't younger guys out there or guys looking for an opportunity who have skills that may be able to come into a front office situation and a coaching situation and make some things happen. But again, it all determines.
But you can't say to them, we're not signing international players. Come take this job, but we're not going to sign anyone whose last name we can't pronounce.
And that has to change. I think that's one of the things, and we've seen the success of other major league teams that have dipped into the international pool. The Orioles have to join the rest of Major League Baseball in that quest because there's a lot of talented players out there that can get you to help you in the minor leagues and make their way up the ladder. Good young talent. They have to be in that pool, and that has to be part of the plan. And that's what I would want to hear from a new general manager or from ownership, whoever it is, saying, "Hey, we're getting into this, and this is what we need to do." They can't just rely on the homegrown talent or the drafted talent.
He is Chris Pika. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter. And, of course, my lifer pal and local sports fan and working out of the fighting city of Atlanta these days on all sorts of baseball broadcast and college baseball, basketball, football, but rarely hockey, right, in your part of the world. The Caps thing, any thoughts from afar on that? I'd love to hear your insights in that, because that's the kind of line of work. I mean, you could have easily fallen into hockey work and become a hockey statistician and a hockey PR guy. That would have been up your alley. It was a lot of fun back in the day, and I know I used to see it at Caps press boxes once in a while back in the Eddie Frankovic era. But the Trotz thing on the backside of this certainly starts to peel back the onion that everything wasn't all mellow inside the land of the Caps, right?
It does. I mean, as a fan, I'm disappointed that Barry decided to resign his position, but he always seemed to be a very thoughtful person, a very thoughtful coach. And you don't make a decision like that as a coach, especially coming off winning a championship, unless you feel it's the right thing to do for you personally. And I think that's where it comes down to. It's not something Barry Trotz never seemed to be a person who would look like he was making a rash decision. He got guys in Washington to buy into what he wanted to do. He couldn't get it done in Nashville over 15 years, and they had to go a different route because the message had gotten tired. And the message resonated in Washington with a bunch of guys, and they made a great run finally to win the Cup for the first time. And if the situation isn't completely to his liking, I got to respect the guy to say, listen, I got you the championship. I did what I came here to do, but now it's time for me to move on and do something else. And he'll be a hero in Washington. We'll never have to buy a drink in that city or in this area ever again. And he'll always be remembered as the Stanley Cup winning coach of the Washington Capitals. And that's a great legacy to have, regardless of what he does, after whatever his next move is going to be as a coach.
I've been blathering on with the Marty Conways of the world and, anyone that would listen on the business side of what the Caps have as an opportunity here, right? Like 500,000 people out there, the trains from Baltimore packed down to D.C. I never thought I'd see that day, Chris, where I could walk the streets in a Baltimore Skipjacks jersey and have people from Baltimore scream at me all day at a Capitals Stanley Cup championship parade. But all that being said, now in the aftermath of this, the first thing they needed to manage, which is kumbaya with the coach, they haven't been able to do. But they have a hell of a chance with this brand, right? I mean, there is this opportunity for hockey to sort of take over and be something. And who knows? Todd Reardon leads them to 2 more Stanley Cups under Ovechkin. I don't know. But in the aftermath, this is the ultimate chance to grow, right?
It is. And listen, they win a championship. They had a fan base that obviously in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, they're very tied into them. You're selling out the arena almost every night, and a chance to grow hockey in the region, which is, I think, always been very strong there. And they've had a plan, and we talk about plans. They've had a plan in place, and that plan came to fruition this year with them winning the Cup. Now, it's going to be hard for them to repeat, and you're going to have to try to keep a team together where guys are going to want more money, and you're going to get guys that are going to want to get opportunities in other places because maybe the money isn't going to be there for them in Washington, and it's going to be very hard. Whoever the next coach is going to be is going to have a tough time. He's going to have to get guys to buy into whatever his vision of the Capitals franchise is and what he sees with the talent he has on the ice, and they do have a lot of talent, and it's going to be a hard road again. It was a hard road this year. It doesn't get any easier to try to repeat. But they're going to be a contender as long as number 8 is on the ice for them in the next few seasons.
Chris Pika is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter. We'll get to fixing the Ravens later on. They're quiet for a couple weeks, so I'll treat you with the NFL respect that you deserve as a former NFL employee. We'll give you the summer off from talking football. We'll give you about 6 weeks here of downtime. We'll get back after it. Of course, the Ravens have the early thing with the Canton trip and Ray Lewis in the early game and the 5th preseason game and all that stuff. I hope you're having a good summer, man. I hope you get home here for some rock and roll and some crab cakes at some point.
Looking forward to getting up there sometime late in August, and looking forward to, even though it's not been a great season, seeing the Orioles here in Atlanta very soon.
I figured, a guy like you, we bring Vince Neal to Dundalk to the Heritage Fair. I thought if that's not going to get a guy like Pika back to Baltimore, nothing will.
That sounds good to me.
See you soon. There he goes, Chris Pika, blog and tackle, the pride of Mount St. Joe and the Loyola Greyhounds, but never a Don. Blog and tackle out on Twitter, working with the Pro Football Writers Association, as well as the Bahamas Bowl and a bunch of different places. And one of my favorite friends and foils, and my first media friend from January of 1984 at the Baltimore News American, or as my parents called it, the News Post. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, the buyatoyota.com audio vault there 24 hours a day with all sorts of views and insights and thoughts and emotions. The morning newspaper delivers at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, as well as our friends at Laurel in the Maryland Jockey Club with the entries in the morning newspaper every morning, as well as on the front of WNST.net. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.